We've lost about 60 festivals this year. If we don't stem the closures, we're going to see all clubs lost by the 31st of the 12th, 2029. They want to antagonize you and prod you to get the best response. You know, a couple of months back, I was hosting the Prime Minister in a bar in Soho. And you've got to orchestrate and distribute, because you've also got to change your persona. You know, how I deal with people on the ground, or artists, or drum and bass artists, or promoters, compared to speaking to the Prime Minister, are just very, very different personas. I really, when I sat in my first government meeting, I started to recognize the value I could represent, because I was giving a reality. And there were a lot of people around the table. There were ex-policy people or ex-politicians that had never pulled a pint. We don't look after each other enough. We're too quick to get the mobile phone out and chat about it, rather than help each other and support each other.
So welcome back to another Rave podcast, and today I've got Michael Keel from the NTIA. Thanks for coming on, Mike. Appreciate it, mate.
No, I appreciate the invite. Thank you.
So outside of all my guesses, what were your inspirations like in music? What got you into the music of the nightlife, and just that journey? How did it start?
It's an interesting one. I actually started in the theatre, and then I came back and got a job on the bar in a really sort of cheesy commercial venue. I then introduced to a guy called Rob Searle. They used to do something called Planet of Sound, where we used to go to Chichester, which was this very sort of honed, resident-driven, mates coming together, listen to electronic music. And my love for that environment sort of grew, and to the point that I became a promoter myself. I used to do drum and bass raves and old school hip hop, and I used to live with a funk, rare groove, soul DJ who used to wake me up with George Benson, Funkadelic, all that sort of thing. So I've got a very broad range of music taste.
That's wicked. Yeah, the old school drum and bass stuff. I love that. You know, with the originals of like Hype and the MCs of like Shabba Det, and it's absolutely amazing. And it's good that it's just getting proper mainstream now. I'm seeing it in North America and everything now. It's just really popping off.
It's interesting. I mean, I was in the early stages. I started doing some promotion around dubstep. So I used to work with Swanee and people like that around Flux Pavilion and Dr. P and things like that. And so I went through tranches of different sort of bass culture, from doing hospitality shows to jump up shows to crossover things that we used to do between sort of jump up drum and bass and live breaks. So there were lots of different influences, I suppose.
Oh, that's wicked. Yeah, that's good to hear that, because I don't speak to many people that like talk about the old school drum and bass days, and for me they were iconic. Do you know what I mean? And I'm 35 years old, and I think they're brilliant.
Listen, I'm 51. I come from an era where we used to give out flyers and travel in a convoy of cars out to fields, and there was a love and a community feeling amongst those sort of free parties when we were. So for me, I just come from that early rave scene, and from acid house so I was part of that. So I just love it. We've lost that sense of community now, sadly. We don't look after each other enough. We're too quick to get the mobile phone out and chat about it, rather than help each other and support each other.
Yeah, like back in the day, like you said with the mobile phones, back in the day it was pick up the payphone. Oh, listen out.
Yeah, but phone boxes. I mean, I've seen a phone box like a revelation. But also those dial phones as well. I remember in my nan's house, a dial phone, one phone in the hallway, and you had to all go out in the freezing cold, because those houses were never. So I think for me, there are so many things I present to my kids now. They just look at me and go, "What's that?"
Yeah, I worked with a young kid the other day, and he asked me what CDs were. I was like,
Oh, wow.
yeah, yeah. He was 18. He was like, I don't know what CDs are. I was like, oh no, I haven't got to this stage of me.
Oh, don't. Well, I mean, I still love vinyl. I'm a real hip hop enthusiast. I love hip hop, and um, I'm a sort of trainer collector, all those sort of things. So I really do live and breathe the sort of that urban culture feel.
That's mate, nice. Kind of goes on to my next question, and kind of like, how did you start the NTIA? Because obviously you've got this background now. You're loving the whole scene, but what made you want to start this up? Yeah.
To be honest with you, it wasn't really started by me. It was started by a guy called Alan Miller, and it was off the back of Fabric closing. When they had the drugs death. And what happened was there was this real build in terms of support for late night economy culture, particularly Fabric at the time to reopen. And I think there was a resonating feeling from policing and saying that if they couldn't stop some of the incidences or thefts and things like that, they would just start closing venues rather than dealing with the issues at hand. So it was felt that there needed to be an association built that started to look after nighttime economy and push back and engage in legislative change and policy. And so that's kind of the starting point, and that made a big difference as it grew. But I mean, my engagement came several years later. I was involved towards the back end, and as Alan moved away, I got the opportunity to step over as a CEO. And then off the back of that, about a year and a half later, the pandemic hit. And if I'm going to be quite frank, I was pushed in front of a Sky TV camera, and then had to really sort of take on this persona as being a bit of a fighter or champion for nighttime economy clubs, culture, that contemporary music element, which really I've continued to do. But talk from a perspective of an operator, because I've been operating for about 30 years. So it's, it comes from a place of understanding the culture as well as the operation.
Yeah, it's good, man. That's why I asked you about like your previous experience, like with the rave scene
Yeah.
and stuff. How is it like getting in like into that organization and running it? Because obviously a lot of people run their own events, and I speak to people like that, but I've never spoke to anyone that started like an organization to help nightlife. So how was that getting into it?
It's not easy. It's not easy. I mean, I come from a background of corporates. I had my own business. I was a promoter. I was a commercial director for a student union. So I've never done this before in my life. So it was almost like feeling your way. But I think I always sort of trusted the authenticity of my background.
Yeah.
So I always knew that I knew the experiences of the staff at the ground working behind the bar, the promoters who lost their money, and also, the operators who are challenged with licensing and policing. And so when I was talking about it, and as I started moving into the area of the trade organization, I really, when I sat in my first government meeting, I started to recognize the value I could represent because I was giving a reality. And there were a lot of people around the table. There were ex-policy people or ex-politicians that had never pulled a pint.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was all of these uncomfortable conversations. I mean, there were some conversations with policy people from different organizations talking about electronic music, which was so awkward because they didn't really understand what it was. They hadn't really experienced what it was about or the
Yeah.
community or where it was born from. So I felt that the one thing that I felt strongly is the authenticity and the integrity of understanding all of those different components about the nighttime economy. And that's kind of what spurred me on, really.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned about like even pulling a point, because I've had this conversation with a previous guest, Amy, and she said everyone should experience, being a bar staff person. I worked at a caravan
Absolutely.
site pouring pints at 18, and glass collecting and all that, and you kind of I've had it with numerous people with discussions, even being a warm up DJ, just kind of understanding the floor. You got to keep the punters in there. Keep it's a circle, isn't it? Like it's a rotation thing. You're all working together as a team. It's not just you're a DJ playing music. It's a whole collective, right?
I think that. I mean, I think the important thing to sum it up is we manage from the ground up as an organization. We're not an albatross organization. We don't sit there and look strategically. We go out and speak to operators and deal with operator issues. And I think the one thing we have within our team is, and we've got a really simple motto, is work hard, stay humble, and recognize your roots, understand where you've come from. I was a glass collector. I know what it's like. You see the challenges, you've got to work through it. It's a horrific job at times. So if you really want the truth, speak to the bar people, speak to the glass collectors or the kitchen porter. They're going to tell you the truth.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. Being a glass case was actually a hard job. You just come out really sticky, smelling the booze all every night, but,
Oh, yeah, yeah. You can never get rid of it. It's like working in a fishmonger, isn't it? You're never going to get away from a butcher, but it's character building.
yeah, it's wicked, yeah. So how did you build a team then around that, for the organization? Like, how do you select people? I know you said, like, you pick people from all different sort of all walks of life, but, actually, narrowing it down to who suits best and where to find these people, how does that work?
Um, to be honest with you, it's more it's more about where their passions lie. I have this thing that, there's no point in making a footballer be an IT expert because they'll always want to go and play football. So the reality is picking people who've got a passion for the industry. I mean, we've got people who are born from licensing, operations, extort, security. Our public affairs people, our well, not ex DJs, current DJs. So we pick from people who have got a passion for the industry and are willing to go that extra mile. This is one thing to recognize is this is not a hugely forgiving role or job within the industry. It's quite thankless at times. So, and you've got to work those hours to get it through. So we need people around us who are willing to give that commitment and drive, but also understand the importance of the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of a good way of, explaining it because, like I said, I've never done an organization and do you know what I mean? This is all new for me, so this is why I'm glad I got you on. And I also wanna kind of go on to, like, the purposes of the NTIA. I know you mentioned it briefly, but, with sorting out government legislation and trying to help out and everything, but kind of just the ground roots of it all. Do you go around to clubs and see what but if they're struggling, or do you just, do talk to I know you said you talk to other people that work in the industry, but really the nitty-gritty part of it to understand what's going on with UK nightlife?
It, it's an interesting one. I mean, we've got a range of access points. I can sit with the Home Secretary one day, or I can go to Motion in Bristol the following day to try and fight for them to survive and fight developers. So I think we've got a range of things that we do. We've got a local network, which is really important. So we influence on a local level, supporting venues, whether it be licensing or planning, or they've got an issue in terms of access and cost. And then you've also then got the national platform, which becomes really important. So we're engaged with all the different government departments, Treasury, Home Office, the Department of Business and Trade, Cultural Department, and we've all got individual strategies around that. So there's a public affairs element, but there is also a grassroots ground level strategy, which is about supporting those businesses. I mean, we've been involved in things like the Cultural Recovery Fund, Let Us Dance
Yeah, yeah.
campaign, which was about making sure electronic music had access to the funding that the government puts out in during the pandemic, to Brixton Academy being closed and Fabric being closed, and us fighting to get them reopened. So I think we've got a range of prospects. Every day is different, every single day.
That's mad that you meet them sort of people though as well. That's, like, for me, I don't, like, do that, but that's mad that you meet, like, the Home Secretary and everyone trying to, get it all organised, right?
I mean, a simple example today, I get a phone call asking whether I can help with the Home Secretary gathering a space for doing interviews. A couple of months back, I was hosting the Prime Minister in a bar in Soho.
Crazy.
And you've got to orchestrate and just, because you've also got to change your persona. how I deal with people on the ground or artists or drummer bass artists or promoters compared to speaking to the prime minister are just very, very different personas. So
Yeah, definitely.
you've got to be quite considered and prepared for all of that to make sure you maximize your opportunity.
For sure, yeah. I guess you gotta do that because you only get a certain amount of time, and you kind of just gotta make that the most kind of. When you go into meetings, are you like prepared, like mentally, or you like kind of just got notes, or how's that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I have briefing notes. I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, I do the Home Affairs Select Committee and the House of Lords Select Committee. So I have to give evidence to a group of ministers and MPs asking and scrutinizing certain subjects that are impact. Well, it's televised. So what will happen is you'll have an hour of scrutiny. You can prepare to a point, but those MPs will ask you questions you can't prepare for.
Yeah, that's
So
mad.
it's quite a pressurizing environment. People don't realize how intense it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I did one on Martin's Law and the counter-terrorism piece, and I prepared about 8 pages of notes. And the first question, so they send you some prompted questions, and they asked none of them. They just went off cuff.
Wow, yeah, okay.
So I was then sort of sat there just literally paddling, trying to answer questions. Luckily, I did all right, but it's the same as the press. Press are the same. They won't tell you what they want to ask. They want to antagonize you and prod you to get the best response.
Yeah, I get that, yeah, yeah, that's what you see. 'Cause this is why I choose questions because, like, you don't you're, like, on social media, you see, like, the highlight reels of everything, but you don't understand, like, the real nitty-gritty of what goes on to try and, like, help the scene and what really goes on, so it's great that you bring this up, and that kinda takes me on to, like, Motion Bristol. I mean, it's sad that I think it was the lease, right, that's run out, but, um
Well, the landlord is pushing for it to become a development site.
oh, okay, right, okay,
Uh, and they've given a term for the lease to come to an end.
okay.
But they're also making it very, very difficult to potentially purchase the property, which I know the guys at Motion would be keen to do. But it's centered around people wanting the most commercial value out of a property. But from our perspective, we want to keep Motion and secure its space as a cultural asset for Bristol.
How do you, like, as soon as you found that out about Emotion, using Network Club specifically for this example, but how do you go, like, start to sort of get the wheels turning for, trying to keep that club open or trying to save the nightlife with that, with the NTIA?
Well, you've got to really start to understand the pressure points. So for instance, Brixton Academy, we knew that Lambeth and the policing were pushing to close the venue, and they had specific asks that they wanted. So what we had to understand is where those sticking points were. So the idea really was ourselves and Save Our Scene came together, and we did a focus campaign at targeting Lambeth Council licensing department. The way that we did it is we created an environment or an inertia where we could drive letters of support through their email address. To be honest, we blew up their email address, 28,000 representations in a couple of weeks.
Wow.
And those representations have to be recorded within that committee as representations. So I think it's the biggest number of representations ever submitted in a licensing committee meeting ever, full stop. So we worked quite hard, not only within the press, but also within the representation stakes to ensure that Lambeth understood that voters weren't happy with what was going on. And we also created a narrative which suggested the police wanted to close Brixton Academy, although they suggested in every other term they didn't. Their motive and the paperwork they presented was suggesting very differently. So we kind of won the battle in the press as well, by suggesting the police wanted to close it. And what you saw was a lot of the public, including the likes of Prodigy and people like that who had their first sort of gigs there, start to turn and focus on policing and put pressure on And that's what allowed us to really sort of leverage and the committee to see the clear light of day in terms of their decision, which is about reopening it, but with safeguards. We can't lose sight of the fact that people have lost their lives, but we don't want to lose a fundamental venue in the center of London by not giving it an opportunity to refine its operation, which is a driver for us.
Oh, that's really well put. Yeah, because again, like I said earlier, you don't see this side of it, right? You just see a club close down, and then you don't hear about this sort of stuff. And everyone that just, like I said, goes on social media and just scrolls, they don't hear this. And me just being like loving the music scene and everything, I, I, I really want to understand what is really kind of going on.
Well,
You know?
just to give you an idea, when we did the Cultural Recovery Fund, Let Us Dance campaign, we were number one on Twitter, 2.8 million impressions.
Wow,
That was put together in a pub and then presented over and put together and put out over 3 weeks. And 2 weeks I spent pretty much solid on the phone speaking to agents and artists and representatives of share, 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 share. And it just got to a point where the critical mass took that forward and the government folded to it. They recognized the challenge. They recognized the fact that the public weren't happy with the way that they didn't allow electronic music to access or contemporary music, and they changed their position. But that was public pressure. That was a bit of activism that did it.
oh, okay, yes, that sounds really good, mate. And going on to my next question, how many clubs are closed in a week now that we're seeing?
We're seeing 3 clubs a week close,
No way.
about 150 a year.
Freaking hell, really?
So, I mean, we recently went out with some press pieces saying that if we don't stem the closures, we're going to see all clubs lost by the 31st of the 12th, 2029.
Wow. And I think I read correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, but the nightlife industry in the UK is worth like almost £8 billion now.
Well, it's actually worth more than that.
Oh, really?
Nightlife is worth 136 billion in turnover per year, 2.08 million people, and it attracts 300 million nightlife visitors per year.
Wow. And they're closing at 3 per week. That's insanity.
It's absolutely crazy. It's almost like the government have redone what they did in the late 80s with Freedom to Dance, where they cull the hours to operation. What they've done this time around is systematically made it very, very difficult to trade, both economically, regulatory, transport, safety, all of those things. Policing late at night, very difficult. Transport getting home, difficult. It's almost like they've done it subversively.
Yeah, it kind of takes me to like Ministry of Sound because they always have to sign a petition because of the noise complaints and everything because they want to take that area right and
Yeah.
develop it. So I know obviously Motion's having that trouble with like the seller wanting to do the property development thing. But
Yeah.
is that happening for most clubs or is it just licensing? I know you mentioned like the transport and everything like that, but
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, we probably get about 4 or 5 a week
okay,
that are talking to us about is, I mean, Moth Club, Boom Manchester, uh, Ministry of Sound are facing things, but they've got something called a deed of easement, which protects them somewhat, although it's not been tested. We've been lobbying for something called agent of change,
right,
which means that if you build a residential space opposite a club, the developer has to account for the continuation of that club to do business by putting mitigations in place in terms of their building. So noise mitigations, double glazing, all those sort of things. So but at the moment it's part of something called national planning framework,
yep,
but it should be part of primary legislation because it's not being considered as much as it should be.
okay, okay. I'm just taking this all in. So if I'm like because it's
Trust me, it's taken a
yeah.
while for me to take it.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand it all because I don't hear this side of it, and I'm really interested. So, that also kind of then takes me on to like festivals and things like that. Are we seeing more decline in the clubs and more festivals, like the one-off kind of parties? What are we seeing? across that
Uh,
sort of spectrum?
no, clubs, I mean, we've lost about 60 festivals this year. So festivals and events are seeing the same challenges.
Okay.
Pubs were losing about 8 a week.
Yeah,
Uh,
pubs have been insane. Right.
Grassroots music venues similar to nightclubs. So everyone's in the same vein. There's, the key thing is the economics are just working against us. They're about 30 to 40% uh, above the cost of operating pre-pandemic. And now with the recent budget, you can put another 30 to 80K on top of that operating cost come April next year. So the reality is the government have squeezed heavily the sector, particularly around hospitality and nightlife. And they're not giving anything back. Whatever they're giving, they're taking away. They're taking away with the other hand.
Oh, really?
Mm.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's mad. Like, I was kind of just blown away by this, really, to be fair. So it's 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 tough, really, because like you say, when I was younger, it was booming, and now it's
Yeah.
just slowly just going down. And what do you think?
Uh,
Go on, sorry, Mike. Go on.
God, so. No, I think the thing is there is a desire to go out because people have not got the disposable income.
Yeah, that's true.
I
Yeah.
mean, we've just seen Ofgem have just said that the cap for domestic energy is going up by 1.2%. What they don't realize is people are already strapped. So that increase is going to pressure people, less disposable income, while we see energy companies prosper.
Yeah.
So there are some hugely sort of sinister dynamics in the economics within the UK. And we are without a doubt the most taxed industry and also the most regulated industry when you look comparatively across the world.
Yeah, because like in the States, they just like I suppose I had one guy on, by his name's Barbuto, and he played in the States, and he said there's just club upon club upon club open. You can walk in one, walk out of another, and it's just continuously thriving that industry. They shut sooner. They don't stay open until like 11 a.m. like some clubs, but there's
Yeah.
just more and more of them. And that kind of goes on to like in the UK. I think that we should have more smaller clubs because I feel like they prop up the whole kind of industry. Like I remember going to some clubs that only held 50 people in a small shop kind of club vibe, and they're slowly closing down along with the pubs now, and it is sad to see.
Well, it's that grassroots movement that's
Yeah,
really important. And I mean, we've seen government come out and say that they support this £1 levy. I think the challenge you have is we've got to approach it from an ecosystem perspective. Because while we talk about the top tier or concerts supporting grassroots, one of the biggest voids that we have in businesses failing is the mid-term capacity venues.
yep,
So if we support grassroots, they start booming, the talent starts coming through. We've then got a void of spaces for them to refine their craft.
yeah,
So I think there's got to be a broader ecosystem approach. And we need to understand how that transfers in terms of value. Because electronic music doesn't have the capacity of concerts in terms of shows. It'll have 10K or whatever, but we're not talking Taylor Swift. So when you start taking a pound off the top, that could fold a business.
yeah,
So the worry is how that's mandated, if it's mandated, who's targeting it, how the money's distributed. There are a lot of questions that are still up in the air about that funding mechanism. Although the ethos is right, where there are a lot of questions outstanding and concerns from people, given the fact that they're already taxed heavily.
yeah. And I mean, obviously, we're in a climate now. I mean, I can only really speak for like the electronic music scene. I can't speak for it, but like have a say on it. But with the electronic music scene, um, there's lots of DJs now. There's lots and lots of talent coming through, but less and less clubs. What would you say would be the thing that the people that are coming up and starting DJing and want to get DJing out there, create event brands, create their own nights? What could they do, to help the scene start more clubs? I know, like, we're seeing an economic difference in pressure back,
Mm.
but what can we do as a collective to try and help that?
I mean, the challenge we have is we've got to go out and support our local businesses. You have to understand, but there's also where there's less disposable income, the frequency of going out has dropped. So I think there is a collective decision that's got to be undertaken from the industry people to actually strike a balance where we've got volumes of people going out and enjoying, particularly nightclubs, late night economy. But I think the biggest challenge is there's got to be a collective effort. We've got to think about transport, policing, safety. We've got to talk about the industry back to supporting the transport infrastructure. We've seen in London people going home at 11 o'clock at night because people are worried about getting transport home. And where they're leaving early, the businesses can't stay open later. They contract their hours and then people complain because there's nowhere to go late. So it's got to be a collective response. I think industry, stakeholders, authorities, local government have got to come together and get a strategy to expand nighttime economy and then give confidence back to the market to be able to come out later, come out more frequently, and have a balanced, more cost-effective experience in terms of a night out. Because as we know, it's more expensive to go out at the moment. And that's what that narrative is putting people off of coming out as frequently as we would like them to anyway.
And interesting. And what city or town you see most in the UK, like lose clubs more? Or, I know London's obviously one of the biggest ones, and Manchester and stuff, but yeah, what city or town are you seeing that's declining more than the
Uh,
others?
I think
Yeah.
Scotland has got some huge challenges because the devolved businesses in Scotland don't have the support of the business rates relief.
Okay.
So where England's businesses have a 75% discount on their business rates, the money that was sent from Westminster to the Scottish government to fulfill that 75% discount was used for something else and not passed on to hospitality or nighttime economy. So they are really suffering quite heavily. The likes of Glasgow in particular, with some of the constraints around transport have not helped. So they are now working on a nighttime economy strategy to regrow where they are. Other cities that I've seen are really challenged are places like Leeds. Leeds used to be a real sort of, we've just seen, back to basic date beers do something with Youssef and the guys in Liverpool.
Yeah.
I think Leeds is one that really needs to regrow. It used to have a real thriving nighttime economy. If you think about Up Your Ronson, Back to Basics, Min Club, all these sort of things, which are really, really important. And we've kind of lost that sort of northern sort of electronic music soul has somewhat been lost a bit. We need to grow. We need to regrow it.
No, interesting. Yeah. And what other support could there be to help out? Like, I know, we're seeing a lot of people just focus on like streaming now and doing Twitch and Spotify and things like that. Do you think that's kind of making an effect on the scene as well?
I think that the different platforms, without a doubt. I mean, we've just seen Amber in Manchester ban phones on the dance floor. We know that we're trying to drag people out of houses. If you think about it, they can communicate, socialize, eat, get drink, entertain themselves from their house, something born off the back of the pandemic. I think there is a level of social anxiety as well. Definitely through speaking to NUS and students have actually forgot how to communicate in front of people,
Yeah, like
and actually engage. So I think there's some of the things that are without a doubt bits of influence market. But the reality is the cost of going out and people having less disposable income off the back of inflation and the operating cost influx is fundamentally the one sole piece that is holding any level of recovery back within the UK.
crazy. Well, I felt I'm a bit sorry, Mike. I'm a bit flabbergasted because I don't hear this kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
it's interesting, and that kind of with the NTIA, do you get lots of people coming in trying to get involved and help out? Like a lot of people reaching
Uh,
out.
we we do. We have a load of people who just want to be involved with what we do. I suppose it's because of our approach. We're not, we're a doors open ground upwards organization. We're accessible. People can speak to me. They can pick up the phone to me. So we're pretty accessible in many ways. And that kind of encouraged me. I mean, I must do 5 or 6 interviews for students a week for papers around nightlife. And someone phoned me the other day because I've got this real mantra that I will never ever turn down a student interview, because I think it's important that they hear what's going on, and if they're interested and engaged, it lifts where we're going. I've got a son who's at university, and he used to really struggle with CEOs getting involved in interviews and giving their perspectives. So, I must do 5 or 6 of those a week. In fact, this afternoon I've got 2, one for Ottawa University
Oh,
in Canada, and then earlier on from that, one for Glasgow University.
oh, nice. So you
So
get to travel a bit then.
yeah, I mean, I'm just back from Australia. So I've been to New York, then LA, then Sydney, then Doha, and back here. So when I was a guest of the New South Wales government and the British consulate speaking as part of a large conference that was happening in Sydney.
So what are you seeing in other nightlifes around the world now you've traveled to these areas? Because they're quite obviously hotspot areas, and what could
Yeah,
we take from them to rebuild the UK scene?
2 things: value
Yep.
and approach. So when I talk about value, nighttime economy is seen as quite burdensome. So it's seen as a cost consumer in terms of policing and the challenges that people face late at night. So we need to change that narrative where we see Berlin look at national portfolio organizations or techno being seen as a really important cultural element for Germany. We need to start to adopt a very different approach to our sector as a whole. And I think the other thing is we have this very conditional partnership approach from a policing perspective, a local authority. People talking about it in a way of, I'm going to talk to you about licensing issues until the point you disagree, and then I'm going to stop talking to you. There is no result. It's a very conditional partnership element. And I think we also need to start to addressing things in the basis of community. So when we talk about nighttime economy, we talk it as an issue, whereas we actually talk as an impact on broader community is a better approach. And what we've seen in Australia and New York is the approach from policing, not about focus on nighttime economy as a problem, but talking about society and the implications of making society better rather than focusing on an area which they feel is the blame culture element. So there's a lot that we've seen in terms of the approach in Sydney and New York City in terms of policing, and other places around the world that without a doubt have got a much more holistic approach. And the trust mechanism is different between industry, policing, and local authorities.
Interesting, interesting. And yeah, sorry, yeah, it's very interesting. So how 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 are the scenes growing there? Do you think like they're on the rise, or they're having some? I know you mentioned some implications, but do you see them being more healthier in the future in different countries, or
They,
do you, or they're
they,
just saying
they
different?
still have the economic challenges.
Yeah,
I think the difference is the approach is actually giving people confidence. It's not as fickle an environment as we would see in the UK.
yeah,
I mean, when you go to Sydney talk about London as the the target city that they want to be compared to. So we haven't lost our mantra, our position.
yep.
I just think that we need to put some work to rebuilding that. Sydney's got a long way off it, and Sydney's almost like a Brighton in some respects. So from that perspective, it's starting to grow. But what they've got is the state, federal governments and industry are working together, and there is a trust between them. And they've got people from the industry in government making sure that the perspective of the industry is represented in the right way. So when policies are born, They are born with a very clear perspective and understanding of the sector as a whole. In the UK, it's not like that.
Mm, okay. I think I'll follow you there. No, that's cool. And what kind of music do you see in these different countries? Like, what's really popping off, like in Sydney, and what's really popping off in New York, and that culture of music?
I mean, it's very similar in Sydney in terms of sort of electronic techno, etc. It's people are very much mimicking some of those sort of core leaders, sort of Berlin. I mean, it's got some great DJs coming out of Australia as well. So, but they definitely aspire to be, as prominent in terms of the UK market. I mean, I was lucky enough to go and see Tom York at the Sydney Opera House. Oh, well, while I was over there, which was a bit surreal with the Minister for Nighttime Economy and Government looking across the sort of harbour in Sydney. So I've had some great experiences, but the music, the experience, the food, the vibrancy. I think the one thing that I would take away is the service levels in New York and in Sydney were very different. There was very much a buy-in in terms of the culture, where I do feel in the UK at points we're almost tired and tired of fighting to actually let the government understand the value of our sector as a whole. It's like we're fighting constantly to do business.
Oh, okay, okay. And do you see the NTIA sort of becoming worldwide thing now? Like, do you see it growing to other cities that are struggling, with the nightlife?
Um, I've just taken over the vice presidency of something called the International Nightlife Association, which covers about 34 territories across the world. So the NTIA has definitely been approached by many regions saying we want to do what you do, but here. Estonia and different places in Europe are very keen to see if they can set up something very similar to the way you do. And I think what they like most is the ethos, the way that we sort of portray ourselves and message and the fact that we're somewhat have a little bit of fearlessness in going out and telling the truth.
Yeah.
So, yes, I mean, we'd welcome the opportunity to be in different regions. We've got NTIA in Australia.
Oh, wow.
So that's something that was born some years back, 2017. But we've definitely been looking at expansion. But at the moment, we're rolling that through the International Nightlife Association based in Barcelona.
Cool. And you seeing a good like collective of people in them areas really coming in as well, like trying to support that as well?
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got Spain, Mexico, Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Canada, US, all on board with that. So people are collectively coming together for to support nightlife on a global scale. We can't get involved in regional, but we can definitely start to direct the values of global nighttime economy and how many people it employs. And we need to start acting as a global movement because I think we've got a lot to offer.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because like I say, you never hear the different perspectives of other countries and what they're doing, right?
No.
You really don't, and it's good to hear that as well because people that want to start like their own brand and event can kind of take inspiration from other clubs where they are sort of lacking or need help and ideas, and
Yeah.
not just see your what you typically would see on social media. You're hearing real voices from other areas to kind of be like, well, maybe we can implement that here and try and help build this part of the scene, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, we do a big conference in February every next year, and we bring about 250 speakers from across the world.
Wow.
We've got about 20 representatives from different countries, Mexico, Argentina, Canada, and we get those perspectives because they bring trade delegations with them. So we get a lot of people that talk to each other about different ways of doing business. And our mantra is really simple: walk away with a greater knowledge and walk away with a greater network. And if
Yeah.
you do that at that event, it's worthwhile. And no suits and uniforms, we ban them.
Just trackers and jeans and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, no, trackies and jeans. It just brings down the barriers. No barriers. People can talk.
Yeah,
It's about the members of staff being able to speak to CEOs and police officers without feeling like they're undermined by or a lower tier. We want everyone to be able to talk to each other.
yeah, that's good. That's good. It makes, like you say, it makes a good environment, doesn't it, to kind of get out what you want to say about it and everything like that. And yeah, with the NTIA, then how do you see that progressing and growing in? Because I know you started a podcast called the Rent and Rave podcast, and you're doing
Yeah.
other things. Like, what other things have you got in the pipeline to kind of, shape it?
Um, we're doing a lot of stuff around sort of people development. We've got a big restoration leisure fund which is coming forward, which looks at we've raised about £100 million in terms of buying freeholds and leasing back to independent businesses to stop the gentrification at the high street, which is a bit heavy, but you can understand how important that is. We're also starting to develop more partnerships in terms of voices. But I mean, there's a really important things that we're doing around electronic music as well. Actually getting that recognized within the culture department and within government, for them to understand the value, for them to understand what they need outside of them being rolled into live music. Really important. We're looking at doing some work with Mixmag on presenting a stronger case for the curriculum within secondary education to include electronic music and more of a technical side in terms. So there's a load of work that's going on. We're also doing some work with the World Health Organization for something called Listen for Life,
Okay.
which is about protecting hearing and training people in venues to look after workforce. And
Yeah.
but we've also got some earplugs that we've created that are going to go out on a larger scale on World Hearing Day on the 3rd of March next year. So what we're trying to do is reduce that 1.1 billion people who have tinnitus or hearing problems. I'm an ex-drum and bass promoter. My hearing's shot.
Yeah, I've got
I
tinnitus.
wish I'd have known about it. Yeah, exactly. So we've done it. We've actually looked at creating a standard for venues and promoters to adhere to in terms of hearing conservation through training, testing, and also filtered earplugs that allow you to work but safeguard your hearing.
Yeah, that's good actually, because my hearing's shot from, like, raving back in the day and everything like that. And
Right.
my right ear's constant ringing and things like that. But I think it's also good because I spoke to one guy I spoke to years ago who used to run clubs, always used to say to me, make sure that if you've got a decent sound system, you shouldn't come out with any sort of ringing in your ears. And I think that's good that you
That's
got
right.
the earplugs as well, but also education around, like, sound engineering. And so it's cool that, like, getting all that collective going, like how to make this, how to shape the sound around, a room, and what levels you need to be. Because some DJs, they redline that mix so crazy, it's like just distorted,
Listen, we've got to get away from volume being the best answer.
for sure.
It's got to, quality is better. I mean, we've got a charter that we're getting venues and promoters to sign up to. We've got the likes of Glastonbury who tested our earplugs this year, as well as many others. But we've also tied up with Specsavers who've got 1,000 sites where you can go in and get your ears tested.
That's cool.
So, you know, so we're thinking about all the different dynamics. The training really is to train one person on site who is a hearing conservation person as a go-to that train all the staff what they need to do to protect themselves.
Yep.
So from our perspective, getting into a venue, getting the charter committee to, getting the training, the earplugs cost effectively. We've now, the time it takes to get those sponge plugs, which do nothing, we've now got something that lasts up to 3 months and it costs the same amount of money as it costs to have those foam plugs.
Yeah.
And then the testing is a well of making sure that people's well-being around hearing health is important. Because what we did, what really triggered us is we didn't realize that hearing health or hearing loss or tinnitus can long-term impact with the resulting in things like Alzheimer's.
That's true, yeah. Because
So
Yeah, my mum and my granddad, for example, they both had perforated eardrums. My granddad from the Navy, and my mum is just was born
Wow.
with it. But like it's wicked that you explain that because I spoke to so many people that bar staff, glass collectors, doormen, everything like that. They don't wear any hearing protection when they're
No, they don't.
working, and we don't think about them people, and it's good that you're bringing that up now.
Well, if you're ill, you go to a doctor.
Yeah.
If you can't see, you go to an optician. Hearing is a gradual process, so you don't know until that point. And there's a really significant point to make. The standard hearing test that's happening in boots and all of these different places is ineffective. It's subjective.
Yep.
It requires you to respond to a noise. What we've got and we're working on is something called AOE testing,
Okay.
which is the test you have when you're a baby. So what it then looks at is how the inside of your ear is, the hair follicles, and really determines whether there's degradation. So there is a stronger case for you to be proactive in making sure that you don't have any further degradation.
Yeah, because don't they do a pressure thing to see how the eardrum responds to the pressure, don't they? That's
Correct.
right. Yeah, I've heard about it. Interesting. Okay. Because that's good to hear that. Because you say I've done loads of hearing tests, and that's how your right ear's worse than your left. I'm like, yeah, I know, and you have to be above this grade. But I didn't think that that was kind of what they're kind of doing
Well,
there.
the good thing is Specsavers as a partner have committed to changing to AOE from the standard test. So they're talking about changing their whole dynamic in terms of move towards audiology. So for us, they're making really positive moves and something that's going to give you a clearer understanding of the challenges with your personal hearing. And then we can, off the back of that, look at earplugs, look at training for people in staff. Ultimately, we also want to go out to those people who want to go out and rave.
Yeah.
So we have been working with people like Ishwaya and Hi and others who are now going, we're really keen to get involved in this campaign and brand the earplugs. And so people, it becomes almost, I always say this, a bit like Live Strong, but without the cheat element.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because them foam earplugs just are terrible. They're all over the ground. They don't degrade. They're everywhere, right?
No.
You go to like construction sites, building sites, they're everywhere on the floor. It's a mess.
The sea's full of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sea's full of them. The ones that we're talking about are filtered, proper attenuated. I mean, we've had the guys that use them, the people that use them at Glastonbury, were blown away by how good they were. And this has taken multiple types of clinical trials to get it to that point. And you can stand and serve someone on the bar, it protects your hearing, but you can still hear people talking to you.
That's cool. Yeah. I'm glad that they're going down that route for the hearing thing because back when I was younger and like yourself, there was no such thing like this, right? And everyone used to stick their head in the boom, in the bass bin, right? So
I don't know. I remember standing in front of an RC1 sound system and I'm feeling like I wanted to cough my lungs up. So God forbid what that's done to me. I have tinnitus periodically, but
yeah.
it does crucify you at the wrong time.
So what do you see yourself in the future now? What do you see the future of the scene, the NTIA, everything like that? What as a collective, where do you see this going?
Um, I think from an NTIA perspective, I just want it to be strong and I want it to be owned by the industry.
Yeah,
So I want it to be, something that people embrace and is holistic and really understands the culture and where it comes from so that the representation is strong. But there's a lot of work to do in terms of the UK, particularly the devolved spaces, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. You've got to remember we're working on different licensing and different legislation in those areas. So every time I cross the border, I've got to start to really understand how I'm talking about different things. So that representation, I think, is really important. Internationally, I think the NTA is going to have a broader influence without a doubt. Um, there's a really positive future. we've gone from a very small organization to quite a considerable organization to 10,000 plus businesses represented. So I want to see that continue and strengthen. If you were going to ask me personally where I want to be, I want to continue the advocacy. I like speaking, as you can hear, because I haven't shut up
No, you've been
for
brilliant,
a
Mark.
while.
You've
But
been brilliant. No, I really appreciate your time.
so for me, yeah, I enjoy the advocacy. I enjoy going internationally and sharing. I've recently been awarded an honorary doctorate from a university on my work in nightlife, and I'm potentially going to be taking up a role as a dean of faculty for nightlife studies at that university, which is great for us and allows us to expand on that education piece. But I think I and do you know when you feel like you have a responsibility to continue doing what you're doing in the right way and keeping the ethos and getting that culture right and expanding the trade organization to a point that it can be at its most effective.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's wicked, mate. No, I really appreciate your time. And is there anything you want to sort of finish up with? Do anything you want to plug? How people can reach you and how people can find the NTIA, make a contribution, that sort of thing.
Isn't it? We're a not-for-profit organization. There's a lot of people that work for us for the love of the industry. If you want to get involved, hit us up. Our website's ntia.co.uk. And if you want to get in contact with me directly, my email is just michael@ntia.co.uk. Drop me a line. I'm open to a conversation, a coffee, and a chat. If you've got a perspective or you've got something you want to talk about that you think will be benefit the industry. But the biggest thing for me is go out, support the sector, remember how important they are, not only for shaping communities, but also your physical, social, and mental well-being. We're an important part of the community and we can't be lost. We've got so much to offer.
Yeah, and you really touched on it earlier with regards to like the mental health part of uh I'm a big advocate for mental health, but
Yeah.
just where the social aspect, we're not we're so glued to our phones in this day and age, and we're not going out to socialize, shake hands, eye contact, read body language and stuff like that. And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier, highlighting that. I think it's important.
It's a crazy world we live in at the moment. Uncertainty is one of the biggest challenges that we have. But, if you're going to live every day as if, you want it to be the best day that you can have. And for me, the best day I can have is going out, socializing, enjoying friends and family, culture, electronic music, live, whatever it is. Engage yourself one way or another, but make it a physical experience.
Yeah.
That's the bit that we need in terms of support.
No. Again, Mike, I really appreciate your time, mate. As we finish up, we're just touching an hour. And yeah, I really appreciate your time, mate. And you've taught me a lot because I've never heard this side. I always interview other people. It's blown my mind. So
No, well, listen, thank you for inviting me on. It's really appreciated. And listen, I'd love to come on another time when, as things evolve, but really, really appreciate the time with you as well.
no, I hope you've enjoyed it. And yeah, because I'm kind of new to this as well. I've been doing it for 2 or 3 years, and I get to meet new people, amazing people, and hear these cool stories. And it's been a pleasure. So appreciate it again.
Uh, Thank you, mate. No, it's been brilliant. Thank you.